Hey guys, welcome back. So I've got a little bit of a DIY video I'm gonna do. I'm standing in my laundry room. I had a washing machine go out and I ended up buying a new one. And I found a really good deal on a budget and such. We found an open box of a really nice one. Ended up bringing it home, getting the dryer off the other unit allowed me to finally take that one apart completely and realized I was actually able to get that one fixed. I fixed it myself. And I just went ahead and put it back, and I decided we're gonna go ahead and keep this extra washer. We have 5 kids, so that's a lot of laundry, so it's just a blessing to my wife to have an extra washing machine. But like most homes, they're only set up for one washer. They only have the plumbing for one washer, and things to consider is the hookups, the supply lines, the water lines, of course. If you have a steam dryer of any kind, you typically use a Y for that. I didn't want to use just a bunch of Ys for the second washer. I decided I'm going to build a manifold using some Sharkbites and things like that, and that's what I'm going to be showing you in this video. Another thing you want to consider is your drain. Typically, there's only enough room for one hose anyways, and if both washers were to drain at the same time, you want to make sure you take that into account because that'll overwhelm that system. You probably need to put another stovepipe in there for each washing machine in order for that to work correctly and have that go into the main supply line. For mine, I'm actually going to put a mud sink in, and I'm going to use that mud sink as my catch for those drains. That way, if they happen to go at the same time, the mud sink has enough overflow that it can catch it all. It's not a big deal. I can also put a little trap in there to catch any lint or anything that might escape, and it won't go down the drain. So I'm not going to cover all of that in this video. In this video, I'm only going to do this manifold that I've come up with. Again, you could get something done with this with just using those Ys, and you just twist them onto the supplies. You would end up needing 2. Again, I'm adding that mud sink, so I would need a third Y for getting water to that. Another issue you'd want to think about is if you're going to bring the supply side of your line too low, if you're going to bring that pressure too low by adding all these things, so make sure you have enough pressure for that. Typically, you're going to want an independent supply line for each unit. That's not what I'm going to do here. I'm going to bypass all that. Another thing that you'd want to consider is your power supply. Is your power supply to this wall going to be enough to support both those washers? So I've already figured out I'm going to be fine as far as the power supply side goes, and I'm good as far as the water pressure goes. So now I'm just going to move forward with building a manifold. In your laundry room, yours probably looks something similar to this. This is really common in most homes now, unless you just have a bare wall with access. So I'm just going to be removing these supply lines, of course, and then tapping in from these lines via some 3/4 inch adapters and PEX piping. And I'm going to build my own manifold, basically dropping down the front of the wall right here. So I'm going to set it up where I'm going to have one supply right on top of the next. And so for the first 2 coming straight out, I'm going to have a cold and hot for the first washing machine. Right below that, I'll have a T, and it'll be a cold and hot for the next washing machine. And then right below that, I'm going to have a shutoff valve with a 1/2 inch connection to go to that mud sink. For cold and hot, both will have a shutoff valve. And then I'm just going to mount that on a piece of wood in order to keep it all neat. And that's all going to be able to be removed. So I'm not doing any actual permanent plumbing changes to these supply lines. I'm strictly making an external manifold that I will just connect to these supply lines. That way, if we ever move or we ever take the second washer out, all I got to do is remove that, and I'm back down to the normal setup for one. Since I am adding that mud sink, I am going to have to actually tap into the drain pipe in order to attach that mud sink, but that's a separate issue for me. Nothing to do with actually connecting to the water manifold here. All right, so I've got all my parts here ready, and since I am going to have to adjust my drains, I got the stuff for that as well. I've got my new P-trap for the sink that I purchased. I got my sink from Habitat for Humanity, so I only actually paid like 20 bucks for my sink. It's a mud sink, just one of the plastic kinds, and everything on it looks perfect. So really good find there. I got to build the legs and stuff, but again, that's going to be another video. Along with that, I've got some of the pieces I'm going to need to put that drain in. All right, another thing, clearly you're going to need another set of supply lines. You've got one set typically for your washing machine, and then maybe a split off if you've got a steam like this has here, and then another set of supply lines for this. So clearly those, and don't skimp on these, get the ones that are gonna last. You're still supposed to even replace these braided ones every so often. I'm not positive what the manufacturer's recommendation is there, but still something you're supposed to replace. But if you get the little rubber ones, you're gonna have to replace them even more often. So again, with them popping and bouncing around, something you want to make sure you have good ones. First off, you're gonna need the PEX that you're gonna be utilizing. So I've got a 3/4 inch of blue and a 3/4 inch of red. That's gonna be my main build. And I did want the separating colors. Certainly you could get just white and it would be enough pipe for everything I needed, but I wanted the colors to stand out. That's just my personal preference, not something you necessarily need to do. And then I've got my 1/2 inch. This is strictly gonna be the supply line for the sink. I'm really only gonna need a very small piece of this, but my local store does not have any smaller cuts than a 5 foot like this. So that's what we're gonna be utilizing. From the PEX piping, clearly you're gonna need some tools. So something for measuring it. I've just got a measuring tape here. And then I'm just gonna be utilizing a razor blade, nothing special there, just making a cut around it. I'm gonna be making these cuts all equally the same, so the space in between each PEX coupling is gonna be exactly the same, mirroring them up from side to side, and again, just making those cuts with a razor. Certainly there is a tool out there for cutting PEX. I don't own one, and it doesn't make sense for me to buy one for a small project like this. And then a Sharpie or something like that for marking your PEX when you measure it out. Another thing I have here is some mounting brackets for the PEX itself. I'm gonna be mounting this whole thing to a piece of lumber, like a 2x6 most likely, and I'm gonna be utilizing these to hold everything down. With the force kickback on the water supply lines of washing machine, there's a lot of jolting with those lines. If you've ever looked at the washing machine as it's running in your house when the water starts and stops, it pushes a lot of force back. I'm gonna be so that's where these come in, just to make sure everything's secure and held in place. And then the supply lines, the braided supply lines, can absorb most of that, as well as the hammers that hopefully you already have on your supply itself. If you don't have those, that might be something else you need to look into getting. But what these do is they help absorb some of that water that's getting forced back into that line, and that way nothing pops, no seals or gaskets or anything in there. And then from there is where the real investment comes in, and that's all of these PEX pieces. This is not a cheap investment. Certainly I could have done this whole thing with some simple Ys. You just spin a Y onto the supply side. I would need 2 on each side, so Y then Y, and then a step down to the 1/2 inch for the water supply line, or 3/8 inch, depending of stepping down that far. But it would be sticking out from the wall a little bit. It would look a little funky. It would have saved a lot of money. Those Ys are about 10 bucks. So 4 of them, there's 40 bucks there. And then the step downs to get to the water supply line for the sink. Depending on how much those are, we could say another maybe 15 bucks there. So all in, maybe it's 55 bucks with some tax and such. With PEX, the investment is quite a bit more. With your standard PEX piece, your coupling is going to be $10 to $20, maybe a little more for some of the bigger ones, but for something like a T, you're looking at about 16, 17 bucks, maybe 20 bucks depending, and then some of your shutoffs could be up there as well. So take that into account when you're building something like this. The PEX itself is a big investment, but I wanted to build it once. I wanted to build it right. If we ever leave this house, I'm going to be able to take this manifold piece off and just take it to the next house, or take it to my next setup installation. Another thing is I could repurpose these things later. PEX can be reused with one of those removal tools, so something to consider there. And then also count out your parts. Sometimes they have a bigger pack. If you need 4 or more, you can get some of these. I did need 4 of these, and that allowed me to save some money there, about 6 bucks. And then otherwise I only needed 2 of each other piece, so I had to buy 2 of each. No real savings to go there, unless you're able to buy some for a future job, possibly buy them all at once. All right, now into the specific PEX itself and kind of laying it out how I'm going to be building this. This is something you can do right there in the aisle at the store as well. Just take the pieces, lay them out. You could lay them out on paper as well, but otherwise kind of staring at the wall of all the PEX pipe, you can look at it and kind of start there. So this is the female piece that I'm going to be needing to attach to the existing supply line. That's where I'm going to start. From there, it will be going into a elbow, 3/4 inch for each one of these pieces. Into the elbow, that's what's going to allow it to basically drop from that supply line and come straight down the wall. All right, from that elbow, we're going to go into a 3/4 inch T that all three sides are 3/4 inch. This is going to, clearly these are going to be connected, but I'm just laying them out to show how they're going to seat. This is going to become a water supply line for one of the washers. And then this is going to feed into the next T, which is going to be a 3/4 inch by 1/2 by 3/4 inch. With that, the layout I chose, I have that 1/2 inch being on the bottom. So it's going to be 3/4 inch supply for one washer, 3/4 inch supply for another washer, and then the 1/2 inch for those sinks. From that 1/2 inch supply, I've got an angle stop here that I'm going to be using as my water supply lines. Just a simple thing that you would see in any under the sink spot in your cabinets or next to your toilet or anything like that. And this will allow me to shut off those sinks. So I'm not ready to install my sink. This is allowing me to go ahead and get all this stuff connected. I could set up both washers for working and then shut it off until I'm ready to put that sink, and otherwise I'm going to be able to attach right to that, but that's going to go right there. I have the male pieces. This is the one that I did need 4 of these because there's 4 supply lines for the washer, 2 cold, 2 hot, and so I was able to save some money with this piece. But this is going to go right onto each of those outside spots for the water supply line, and this is right where the washer is going to connect. From there, everything is just going to mirror for the opposite side. So the left side of mine being hot, the right side being cold. And then that angle stop. So everything just mirrored from both sides. And again, the supplies. So in between each one of these connections, I'll be using the PEX, of course, so red or blue for hot or cold, and then I've got the white for the 1/2 inch connections down here at the bottom. When you're cutting the PEX, you want to have enough that you are going to have a little bit of space in between each pipe. You want to know that you have enough material that's going to go down into these connections on both sides, where you're not just grabbing onto a little piece. You want to make sure that it's fully seated, so don't cut it short. You can measure into here to see how deep you should have. Also, it's listed on the materials themselves saying how far to seat them. There's also measuring devices out there. I don't think you need those. You can measure them all yourself, but make sure that you have enough space in between each that you're not cutting them short. So you wouldn't want these to just be right on top of each other, because then you're questioning whether both of those are seated correctly. So you want to see some red and blue material in between there, or white if you went with white. From there, this is exactly how mine is going to lay out on the wall. So rather than having everything turned and sticking straight out to tap into from the wall, my supply lines will be tapped into from the sides. And since I'm putting these on a block of wood, I'm going to have a little bit of space behind each one of these connection pieces, with plenty of room to twist those on, right? It's not like it's right up against the wall. Another reason having that block of wood will help. But this will make it where it's a bit of a thinner profile, where this is behind the washing machine and not a whole bunch of stuff poking forward. Because if I were to put all of these just facing out, it'd be about 10 inches, including once you have the water supply line from the washing machine twisted on. So if that works for yours, they could stick straight out, of course, but laying flat like this is what's going to work for me the best. And again, these elbows are just going to look like this, coming straight down from the supply line. And as I mentioned, guys, when you're in the aisle, you can just take all these parts right there in Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever you're at. You can go ahead and lay them out to kind of get your head wrapped around what you're trying to build. Sometimes I spend a lot of time in the aisles just figuring that kind of stuff out, especially when it comes to something like plumbing or maybe even electricity. Make sure you've got the right parts. You can also over purchase and return the extras just to make sure you've covered yourself. That's something that regular contractors do, of course. They don't want to keep making trips back to the store, which every single one of us has done it, but it's always frustrating when you realize you forgot something. All right, so from there, it's time to go ahead and start measuring some pecs and putting this together. One more piece I forgot to mention, you do need a conversion piece to couple to the hose bib. So female hose to go into an MPT, FMPT, unless they probably make a connection that goes Sharkbite 3/4 inch to female hose. My location didn't have one, and I didn't see one on their website that you could order, but I'm guessing it's probably out there, maybe even from a knockoff. All right, so for that first cut, for a 3/4 inch pecs, 1 1/4 inch is going to go into the pecs itself. So it's different for each size. If this was a 1 inch diameter pecs, it'd be 1 1/2 inch in there. And then if it was the 1/2 inch pecs, which we'll be doing, it's 1 inch that will go into the fittings. So again, I've accounted for that in this measurement. I'm gonna measure out a blue one to match this as well. This first piece is just gonna come straight off of the hose bib for that first connection there. So I'm gonna mirror those two, and then I'm gonna make a slightly longer one to drop down to the rest of the manifold itself. That way I have enough give for actually being able to set it against and mount it against the wall. Just making sure I'm not putting any pressure on any of the couplings up top when I do that. So for the first cut, as I mentioned, just taking a razor, you want to make it straight across, all the way around in a circle. Again, nothing fancy. If you get through the first part there, then you can work it through the other side. So as you can see, that's it. And we just clean that up a little bit. So for that first connection, I've already put some thread tape on here as well. I've put that hose bib adapter on there and already cranked those down. This piece will go onto the hose bib itself much easier than this connection was, so I went ahead and made that connection first. And then for attaching them, it's as simple as that. Pushes right in and you're done. The next piece is going to go right on the corner here. So straight to a corner piece. And that's it. 1/4 inch in between. And then this is that little tool that I was talking about. If for some reason you needed to take these back apart, that tool right there makes that possible. They have nicer ones too that have like a clamp to them, but as you can see, that one works pretty well. So again, pecs, a little pricey, but you get what you pay for. They're reusable. There are some knockoff ones out there, like I mentioned, on Amazon or other such places. Some of them have pretty good reviews. I thought about giving them a shot, but I decided to go ahead and use the Sharkbite. All right, so from there, I just gotta cut the rest of the pecs down and make all of the connections. Got all the hoses cut down for this main part of the manifold, and then I still need to cut those longer pieces, but I need to make sure how much room I'm gonna need there. So I'm gonna get this put together, mount it to the block, and then I'll make that determination as far as how long I want it to be to that manifold. So again, just super simple connections. Snap them in. Make sure you're connecting the right pieces. You don't have to take anything apart. I did step up the distance between these to a 1/2 inch. Okay. The 1/2 inch here. And then these have a little collar on it. Don't necessarily need it. That's more so if you're finishing it into a wall. And essentially that's it. That's those pieces put together. Again, this is that section I'm going to be measuring out still to make sure how much room I need to run it down because of the amount of connections I needed to make coming off of the actual hose bibs. These are sticking out a little further than I wanted them to, so I might need to use a bigger plate to mount to. I'm gonna make that determination next. This is the block that I've cut down, and now I'm just gonna strap it to it. These are the clamps that I picked up. They're good for a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch pipe. They've got a little inner ring there that can clamp around either. And I went ahead and pulled the nails out and replaced them with a Spax screw. I just prefer to work with screws versus nails, so I went ahead and exchanged all those with just some general wood screws. Now it's just a matter of snapping them all on and mounting it to this block of wood, and then I'll determine that hose length. All right, line it back up where I was planning to put it. As I mentioned, these are going to be hanging off, so I have plenty of room to attach those washer hoses. All right, that's it. All right, so that's basically the manifold that I came up with. The 2 hoses are still going to come up top here, and I have 2 more clamps that I am going to attach those hoses basically here at the top of this board, and then I'll be able to tack this board into some studs hopefully, or in a different way. All right, so I've got those pipes cut down to the length that I need, and then I am going to install it here at the bottom. But if I needed to, these could all turn in any direction. So if I wanted to offset it down off to the side here, I could, if that made sense for some reason, getting it maybe under where the cabinet of the sink is going to be. I could also angle these straight up, in which I could just put this whole manifold up above the water supply, if that made sense for some reason. But I want to be able to put shelving up there, so I'm not going to do that. This is where I am going to go ahead and install mine. And again, all of this can be changed if I change my mind later. So we just get them pushed in. All right, and before I go any further with bolting this thing to the wall, do anything like that, I'm gonna go ahead and connect all the water lines and just make sure that I don't have any seal issues. All right, so everything's hooked up. I put some tape inside each one of these connections just to make sure I've got a good seal. I also got them cranked down to make sure that I hit the O-ring inside each one of these. Didn't over crank them on the washer, of course, but at this end made sure that I had a complete connection. And otherwise, water on. And everything looks good. I tested it the first time and I had a slight leak over here, which I just needed to crank that one down a little more. That's also an older supply line, this set here going over to that first washer. So might be something I need to look at replacing if I see any leaking there. Another call out here is I have one of the water sensor pucks that you can get. It'll send an alert to our alarm system. I've got a few of these all over the house. This one's for laundry room. So I'm going to stick this one back here behind these units, as it always is. And if for any reason I have a leak of any kind, any type of fail, I'll immediately have alert to my phone and I'll take care of it. But so far everything looks good. Now it's just time to run a load of laundry and see how it works out. For now, we're just gonna be exchanging the drain hose using one washer at a time. And once I get that sink installed, I'll do another upload with that. All right, guys, and there's that. Just a water manifold that I came up with myself. I cannot wait to get the comments on this because I'm sure I'm gonna get a bunch of comments possibly saying they don't agree with the way I did it. Definitely understand the ones that are gonna say that it should have a dedicated supply line inside the wall. I'm not gonna pull a permit to do anything like that. Not saying you guys should do that. Definitely pay attention to the codes in your area and such, but I'm making this a temporary hookup for my family. If we move anything else, if we decide to do something different, we can take the washers with us. We can take all those parts with us. No big deal there. Certainly, again, as I had mentioned a couple times, you could have totally done this with Wise and been out the door with new supply lines for probably $100. With what I put together here, it was quite an investment. I do think it's going to be quite a bit nicer to be able to utilize with adding that sink and such, rather than just having a bunch of Wise hanging out in here, which I did not want to do. Leave your comments. Let me know what you would have done differently. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching my content. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.